This footage is terrifying. Hundreds of thousands of people have had to flee their homes. Homes themselves are being burnt to the ground, and valuable ecosystems are being lost forever. And all around us, there are images of firefighters working tirelessly to contain the flames. Of course, this isn't footage from one particular wildfire. Instead, it is a collection of clips from various fires that have been raging across the northern hemisphere this year. But despite these fires being so widespread, they haven't made headlines in many parts of the world. So why don't we seem to care about them? Well, it helps if you understand what fuels wildfires. First, you need fuel. This can be vegetation such as trees, shrubs, and grasses, or even structures such as houses and sheds. Next, you need oxygen. Finally, you need a source of ignition, like a lightning strike, falling embers, a discarded cigarette, or arson. Most wildfires are ignited by lightning. Because while humans are responsible for 40% of wildfires globally, 90% of those human-caused fires are started on purpose. That means that most wildfires are started accidentally, and once they start, well, they just run with it. They spread from fuel source to fuel source, creating a positive feedback loop. As the fire spreads, more trees and shrubs are burnt, which dries out the soil beneath them. Then when the fire moves on, it leaves behind land that's even more primed for burning, which is why wildfires tend to get bigger and more intense as the season goes on. But here's where things get complicated. Because not all places experience wildfire in the same way. For example, if you live in the UK, you might be forgiven for thinking that wildfires aren't really something you need to worry about. Sure, there are wildfires somewhere else in the world at any given time, but they're always somewhere else. The chances of a wildfire affecting you personally are very low, especially if you don't live in a rural area or work as a firefighter, and it's easy to get complacent. You might think that your local government is doing enough to prepare you for wildfires. After all, it doesn't rain much in the summer and it gets hot, but it's never that hot. Surely a few warm days followed by a dry spell isn't enough to cause a wildfire. But this line of thinking is flawed, because climate change is making conditions drier for longer. So while you might have experienced a handful of hot days every summer growing up, today you're experiencing more hot days than ever before, and they're hotter than ever before too. So while you might think that wildfires aren't something you need to worry about, it's worth considering whether that'll still be the case in the future. But let's step back for a second. Why are wildfires increasing in frequency and severity across the northern hemisphere right now? Well, part of the answer is down to weather. All of the wildfires we see in this video are burning in areas that have experienced prolonged droughts. And while some regions like Siberia are used to regular wildfires, others like northern China are not. In fact, this is the first time on record that forest fires have occurred in China's Gobi Desert. But while regional weather patterns play a role, the wider trend of increasing temperatures creates conditions that are ripe for burning across the whole planet. Higher temperatures mean more evaporation, and therefore less water is available to sustain life and increase the risk of wildfires. The best example of this is California, which has seen over 7.9 million acres burnt by wildfires this year alone. That size is bananas. It's an area larger than Belgium, and California has set its own record for the most land burnt in a wildfire season multiple times in the past 2 decades. And while weather plays a big part in how bad a wildfire season is, researchers have found that rising temperatures are also lengthening the time available for fires to burn. A warmer spring and summer mean that vegetation dries out earlier and stays dry for longer, creating a longer wildfire season. And while vegetation needs to be dry to burn, it also needs to be green. Green vegetation has oils and resins that act as natural accelerants and help fires spread, and researchers have found that warmer temperatures lead to plants producing more of these flammable substances. Warm temperatures also lead to more lightning strikes, which creates more ignition sources and increases the number of wildfires. So with all of these factors combined, it's no wonder that wildfires are on the rise. But surely if all of this is happening, we must be talking about it, right? We share footage of wildfires online. We talk about them with our friends and family, and politicians and experts discuss the risks and try to reassure us that we're being kept safe. But maybe we're not being kept as safe as we think. In recent years, scientists have become increasingly concerned about what they call a wildfire paradox. While it's common sense to assume that more severe fires will be covered more often in the media, studies have found that in the United States at least, coverage of wildfires has actually decreased since the 1990s. And what's worse is that as coverage decreases, so does public concern. Now there's a whole host of reasons for this, including the fact that news outlets focus on covering wildfires that are close to major population centers because they are more likely to affect people who read or watch their news. Coverage of wildfires further away tends to take a back seat. But another reason could be that journalists are wary of becoming too alarmist. Wildfires are a natural part of many ecosystems. And while some wildfires do get out of control, others are lit intentionally to help restore habitats and clear land for new growth. so journalists sometimes tread carefully to avoid giving readers the wrong idea. What's more, there's a limit to how much attention any one event can get. And these days there's always another crisis going on. There was a war in Ukraine, then there was inflation to worry about, then interest rates, and then the US debt crisis. Of course, none of these crises are more or less important than each other. They just capture our attention at different times. But the result is that we only pay attention to wildfires when they hit close to home or when they make headlines. Either way, the end result is the same. When we don't pay attention to wildfires, their risk grows. When their risk grows, governments are less likely to fund the resources needed to fight them, meaning that when they do occur, firefighters are less prepared. People are less likely to take preventative measures like clearing brush and debris from around their homes or evacuating when told to do so, and communities are less likely to invest in the infrastructure needed to keep people safe from wildfires. Now, you might be thinking this sounds a bit dramatic. Sure, wildfires are bad, but is it really the end of the world? Well, for some, it already is. In 2021, an estimated 43 million people were directly affected by wildfires in the US alone. That's around the same as the entire population of the UK. What's more, some communities are disproportionately affected by wildfires. First responders and historically marginalized groups are often at higher risk of wildfire exposure, because they are more likely to live in areas that are prone to wildfires, without air conditioning to stay cool or with jobs that force them outside. And in a warming world, this trend looks set to continue. But it's not too late to make a difference. If we educate ourselves about the risks, lobby our governments to take action and change the way we live, we can all play a part in reducing our risk of wildfires. Speaking of wildfires, did you know there's an app that helps you learn about topics just like this one? It's called Nebula, and it's made by CuriosityStream, who've teamed up with me and thousands of other creators to bring you documentaries and series you won't find anywhere else. For example, my colleague James L. has created a documentary called Our Changing Planet, which takes you through the ways that climate change is affecting our world right now, from extreme weather to rising sea levels. All of the content on Nebula is exclusive, meaning you won't find it anywhere else online, which gives creators like myself more freedom to explore ideas like the one in this video without worrying about upsetting anyone. We can all get a bit too precious sometimes. And by signing up to Nebula today, you can help support our channels and keep us independent.